and I think, you're right. They could do that, but also, I mean, we have critical thinking abilities. And I think one of the things to do here is understand, like, hey, what makes this deck reasonable to play over something else, right? And if you ban Entomb, there's no reason to play Reanimator over a different deck.
Hey, I just want to give a quick shout out to all of our Patreon supporters out there. Thank you to the Durdle Maniacs. If you want to be a Durdle Maniac, go to patreon.com/Eternal Durdles and help support the channel. It keeps things going. It keeps things updated. Thanks so much for watching. On with the show. Hello and welcome to Eternal Durdles. I'm your host, Zach Clark, and with me as always, Phil Blackman. Phil, how's it going, man?
Zach, we had a big day today. We all want to hear if Sensei's Divining Top is going to finally make its way back in after a long-awaited ban announcement. We have Max Gilmore here who's going to tell us all about it. Max, welcome to the pod.
Max, great to have you.
Sensei's Divining Top is unbanned for you and you only, Phil.
Wow. What? Fine. See, Max, you got to come on more often, man. You get it.
But Phil, you have been banned from Magic the Gathering.
Yeah, that's...
Unfortunately.
Yeah. You can play Sensei's Divining Top, but you're not allowed to play Sanctioned Magic anymore.
You can't play, just actually can't play nerd cards anymore.
Yeah. Unfortunately. Okay, so let's start with the announcement. We know that Microspawn and Troll of Cosmic Doom have been banned. We've read through the announcement, and I'll bring that up in just a moment. But I wanted to get letter grades from each of you, and then I'll go into my letter grade. I'll explain mine, and then we'll have Max explain his, and Phil will explain his, and then we'll just kind of go into it from there. So, Phil, letter grade.
F.
Okay, damn.
F, but not for their choices, for different things, which we'll get into.
Yeah, Max.
A.
Max is A. I am going with a C+. Now, I feel like Phil's gonna get into his F situation as we go through. So I'll do my C+ real fast, and then we'll talk to Max about his F real fast. So my C+ is
A.
Sorry, yeah, that's what I'm sorry. His A. Yeah. So my C+ is this is a passing grade. You know, you're gonna get your degree. I think that this is fine. The format is getting healthier. That's what the plus is for. You know, but you could have done better. You could have done more work. You could have done more research. You could have, I don't feel like you gave it your total effort. This is an average effort, and we'll take it. Max.
Okay, so the A is because historically they would not have done anything here. The numbers are to leave Legacy the way it is. If Legacy were a Pro Tour format, there would have been no changes. Because the deck's metagame was relatively balanced, no win rates are out of control. They banned based off of understanding how the aggregate of or the average of some way to get the average player sentiment, and banned based off of trying to maximize overall Legacy player enjoyment. And I think that they did a really good job of that. I think that whether or not all the individuals on this podcast feel that way, obviously not to be said, but Legacy players as a whole, I think this is what they wanted, and they nailed it.
Yeah, I can agree with your statement there. I think at the end of the day, Legacy players are going to be happier with this than nothing, for sure. All right, I'm going to share the screen. Finding the right high-end cards for Legacy, Vintage, Pre-Modern, or Old School Magic can be challenging. That's where friends 3-for-1 trading come in.
3-for-1 Trading is one of Europe's top Magic the Gathering retailers with an incredible selection of premium singles, sealed product, and even full sets, all available with free, fast, and secure worldwide shipping.
They add fresh inventory every Wednesday with weekly deals and discounts. So whether you're hunting for that elusive piece of power, a Legacy staple, or something spicy for your collection, they've got you covered.
First high-end orders over $500 or 500 euros, use the code EDFREE to get free worldwide shipping.
Check them out now at the number 3, the number 4, the number 1.gg/ED. That link takes you right to the shop and helps support the channel.
Huge thanks to 3-for-1 Trading for supporting the Legacy community. Now back to the show.
So we're going to go over the announcement itself and dissect it just a little bit.
Do you want to hear about the F?
I'm sure Phil will get into the F all by himself. We probably won't have to have him give us too much on that to figure it out. But Phil, do you want to just give us a taste? Give us a taste.
You want to read here?
Well, no. You know what? Phil and I went on a whole rant on, and that'll be up on the Patreon. So I feel like you're going to get a lot of Phil's F in the Patreon, and I don't want to spoil it for people.
I'll give this broad scope.
Okay, fine.
My broad scope is that I don't have an issue with the fact that the cards that they chose to ban or not unban. That all that is a wash. Like, I agree with the reason that Max's A is there, which is historically they would have done nothing. My caveat as to why I'm giving them an F is because I'm holding them to a higher standard than what they've done historically. I parsed through this ban announcement and what they wrote, and I don't know what any of the things that they say mean. Every single thing they say, I'm just going, but what does that mean? I just want more transparency and understanding as to the language that they're using as to what they're talking about. Because every sentence that they say, I go, what does that mean? Like, I want more. And that happens every ban announcement. I just want to know more and know that, like, the people who are designing the game are responsible and have, like, the grasp of what their designs are impacting. Because we run into the same, like, they talk about the same things over and over. And so if they're not learning from that historically, as we go from ban to ban, then it just keeps getting this amorphous language. And that's what tilts me, which is why I give them an F. It's because I want them to be at a higher standard to communicate to their players.
All right. That's a fair point. And like I said, we're going to have, you can go onto our Patreon, and Phil and I will be screaming at each other for like 25 minutes straight about this. And we did that. It was actually good because Max was in just a little bit earlier and like had to take care of some stuff. So we had a scheduling thing, and that gave Phil and I a chance to like kind of let the steam off, and we can look at this a little bit more rationally now. So let's look at the, I'm just going to read through some of the more important points, I think. And if you guys think that there's something I'm missing here, let me know, but I'm just going to try and get through most of what we're talking about here. So, by the numbers, Legacy of the Day does a good job at emulating a balanced format. The most played deck, Dimir Reanimator, isn't taking too large a piece of the pie, and the next handful of decks consistently showing up aren't as so at clips that are wildly out of bounds. The issue is that despite having several different decks, the format's slower macro archetypes, like mid-range and control, have been largely pushed out of the metagame as environmental pressures have widely condensed games. Furthermore, player sentiment and event attendance has trended downward. It's apparent to us that people who love to play Legacy do not love to play today's Legacy. So we're taking a couple steps to try and improve the format. Max, your thoughts?
Yeah. So hopefully, Phil, over the course of this, I can answer what does this mean, because all of this resonates with me. Just I feel it in my bones, fully understand it. Yeah, by the numbers, Legacy was balanced. The overall deck representations, nothing was out of whack. Nothing was winning too much. They've historically used like a 55% non-mirror win rate as a threshold for banning things in the past, which I interpret to mean that nothing has been exceeding that. And then they're also saying, but hey, a lot of these historical like archetypes that work in Legacy, like mid-range and control decks, have been nuked out of the format because basically everything is too fast. Everything has been condensed into, you are being punished for making your land drops, and you're being punished for missing a quick blip of a window at any step of the way in the format. And so basically, why try to play fair when if you stumble for half a turn cycle, you lose? It's not a reasonable way to approach. So they're taking steps to try to make playing fair a reasonable way to approach the format.
Yeah, I think if they had, like, when they say by the numbers, I want to know what numbers they're talking about. When they say, where is it? They at clips, but aren't doing so at clips that are wildly out of bounds. I want to know what the bounds are. It's more so that, like, I understand that like they don't tell us the data that they look at to make decisions or inform themselves, but like I don't understand why not. We know that they don't test for Legacy, so I don't understand why being able to like show us that outside of like making these like I just don't.
I get it, because they don't want to be beholden to it. So yeah. Because
they want to be nailed down.
Right, exactly. If they say, okay, we banned this deck because it has a 55% win rate or whatever, because they did that with Ren and 6. Now, anytime a deck has a 55% win rate, we're like, Where's the ban?
Yeah, but then they could hold that to a standard of if it's a 55% win rate for a given amount of time, right? Like there could be a threshold because eventually they're making that decision if that's what the standard that they would normally go to make their own ban announcement anyway. So like if they want to kick the can down the road after like we show them the data that they typically go off of, they always have the option to kick it down the road if they're like we think that like it's not enough time because we're looking at it for this long. If there was just an agreement that they could at least share, that way we actually can like hold their feet to the fire in some way to like show that you guys are being responsible for the game that you're designing. Like I feel like it eschews the responsibility.
Hey, Legacy fans, since you're enjoying the show, please like and subscribe the video. It helps the channel grow.
Support Eternal Durdles on Patreon so we can create even more content and cover events.
Patreons get an ad-free RSS feed, 4 bonus episodes a month, and Discord recognition. Join the Durdle Maniacs at patreon.com/Eternal Durdles.
Now back to the show.
I mean, I think assuming responsibility would have been, Legacy looks fine. Numbers are fine. I think that they're actually like, they reached out. I think that they watched your last Eternal Durdles or not the last one, but the one where you got everyone, the panel of people to provide their input on what they wanted to see banned, because their response largely emulated that. I think they listened to podcasts and listened to the rationale of why to ban Troll over, Reanimate, or why to leave Entomb. Because I think that I've been listening to podcasts and videos, and a lot of people touched on the same points that they echoed here. So I think they are doing their due diligence. They are doing the research. They're listening to the cast. They're watching the episodes. They're reaching out to Legacy community members. I know that for a fact, actually. I know a couple people who are prominent Legacy members who were reached out to ask for their opinions on the format and why. And so I don't know what else they could really do, given the fact that they're responsible for all of the other formats listed here, and they have to test their Pro Tour formats a lot more rigorously.
That's something I didn't know that I wasn't privy to, that they have reached out to other people, which is great. That's wonderful. But why not give us that transparency? Because they should know that.
I mean, all transparency isn't good, because basically the way that the Magic community as well as I do, right? Like,
of course,
it's every single.
This is the reason why we don't have a community panel, because people are reactionary, of course.
Exactly.
Even if they said we reached out to people, that would be interesting. Like, because I didn't know.
No, because as soon as they say that, like, well, I didn't get reached out to.
I'm fine with that. Don't reach out to me. It's okay.
But a lot of people, I did not get reached out to. I am fine with that. But there are people who probably would feel like, well, they didn't reach out to me. Am I not prominent enough Legacy community? Like there's so many things about that there's that's why they aren't necessarily being forthcoming with that sort of thing, because every single snippet of extra that they give us turns around and bites them in the ass. And so I think they're trying to be vague to say, hey, we're looking at the community, Legacy community at large, and trying to understand it, and trying to understand what you guys want, and trying to make this essentially casual format enjoyable for the aggregate, the average of you guys, and making those changes. And so I guess I don't quite know what else we could ask for. I would have liked to see some unbans, but I also understand why they didn't.
Max, before we jump into Troll of Khazad-dûm, because you're like, I think your understanding of the choice for Troll versus any of the other things. I know Entomb was also the other player. There was a couple of people that I know were interested in Reanimate. People on the outer fringes too were looking at banning one of the big creatures like Atraxa and all that.
Yeah, I said Troll.
Going here on Troll. When they say up top that they go, the problem that we're trying to solve is the wildly condensed games that otherwise push mid-range and control out, and then go towards Troll. What do you think? How big of a deal is it that Troll is the blending of blue-black tempo and Reanimator versus the wildly condensed games? When I read that, I think of that as, that's Entomb for Atraxa or Grizzlebrand. That's the cards that effectively end the game on the spot.
I think it's two different problems. I think that the reason why they banned Troll is because they've basically, I play a good amount of Vintage too, and in that format they have essentially what they call the pillars of the format. They're never going to restrict Workshop. They're never going to restrict Bazaar.
Of course.
Those things like that. And so they have these pillars that they want to exist in the format. And in Legacy, Reanimator is one of those pillars. They want a Reanimator deck, they want a spell combo deck, they want a Delver deck, and they want mid-range and control to exist. They want creature decks. They basically want all these archetypes to exist in a way. And so,
to that end, they did say that basically in this announcement.
Exactly. And so they're not like, sure, they didn't pull the condensed Entomb, Reanimate, Kill You card out of the format, but what they did do is they're trying to set it up so that Graveyard Hate works. Because right now the problem is that Graveyard Hate doesn't work against them because they have this tempo plan that will beat you if you mulligan to Graveyard Hate and are prioritizing Graveyard Hate. And so the way that so it's like two different points that they're trying to address here. The Microspawn ban, I think, is really pushing to the wildly condensed games. And I also want to touch on Oopsal spells later because I think that also contributes to it. But with regard to Troll of Khazad-dûm, I think that's not necessarily the point they're making with that. What they're trying to do here is they're trying to make sure that your Reanimator deck doesn't kill you with Wasteland and flashing in a Bowmaster as you cantrip for your Graveyard Hate. They're trying to set it up so that the Reanimator deck is a very powerful deck that it has been like a tier 1 to 2 deck since, for the past like decade, dozen years or so. But it has never been impressive over that time until it became a tempo deck too.
Eternal Durdles is proud to be sponsored by Moxfield. Moxfield is the best Magic the Gathering deck building website on the internet. You can create, share, and find decks from Commander to Legacy and even fan-supported formats like Pre-Modern and Old School. You can see all of our decks on our Moxfield. Follow the links below to stay tuned.
Off of that then, isn't then based off the previous ban that they made on Psychic Frog, wouldn't then, like, through that lens, the better ban in that situation be to ban one of the tempo threats, like either the Bowmaster or whatever the other insert tempo threat of choice a la Psychic Frog, if that's the thing that they're trying to, if they're trying to push more towards, Reanimator that has to touch the graveyard, Troll touches the graveyard. That's the part that I would think, even though it is blending because it's part of your mana base, it is blending towards that side where Graveyard Hate would turn that part of it off, right?
Right. Well, Grief was a blend of the Fair and Reanimation plan. Frog was the same thing because you could always just like discard your Entomb target, easy peasy, grow things out of the graveyard, just quick synergies there. And Troll is again a tempo hit. They're trying to hit the tempo Reanimator blend because they want tempo to exist. They want Reanimator to exist. They don't want basically the deck that can do both. And if you draw the wrong opening hand for their game plan, you lose kind of deck to exist.
So if that's the case, is there, what part of the deck right now going forward do you think is okay? What is the new thing that potentially blends, if there is anything at all? Like, is there something based on this that we should be like, this is now going to have the spotlight on it?
Well, I think what's going to probably happen if people are playing this deck, like the Tempo Reanimator hybrid deck, is that they're going to branch into a third color for either Oliphant or the Generous Ent. So either dip into red, dip into green. And both of those have reasonable mana bases around them. They're worse mana bases, which means all of a sudden, instead of having this super stable matchup against mono red where you can fetch your basic swamp with Troll of Khazad-dûm, now you're fetching limited to splash color, which means you're basically fetching dual lands. And you have a 3-color mana base, which means that you can't fetch your wasteland. You can't just run a ton of wastelands on a low land count anymore, or your mana is way too fragile. So I think that the mono red matchup for either of these 3-color Tempo Reanimator decks goes from pretty good to kind of bad. And I think that that's an important thing because, I mean, if you look at why Eldrazi is not oppressive, it's mono red, it's Painter. Having a bad mono red matchup in the current metagame is a serious problem. And so I think that the deck can still exist in a vacuum. I think it's totally reasonable to like play that kind of thing. But I just don't think it's going to be as oppressive because I think some of the matchup profiles get worse.
Yeah, man. My biggest issue though still is I have a hard time believing that this is a core statement, is that this deck has to be part of Legacy. the Entomb and Reanimate part of the deck has to be part of Legacy. I think you can still do Reanimate stuff without this.
I mean, a lot of people want Brainstorm banned. A lot of people
I was going to say, Zach, I push back there too.
Want Days banned. I think it has to exist because I know people firsthand who play Legacy to play Reanimator. Like, there are multiple of those people that I know and like I've played with for years. And so I think that if Reanimator got banned, here's
my point though on that is that, Max, eventually if you're correct here and we get to a point where people switch into the Generous Ent and Oliphant builds, right? And then we get to a point where that's too good. Do they just ban that too? Like, how many cards have to die for Entomb to live?
One thing I said, I think Entomb should always live. I think Entomb is unbannable. But I think that they could hit Reanimate and say, okay, your reanimation effects cost 2.
Yeah, I think that's...
I think they could do that.
With that.
They could have Dance of the Dead, Shallow Grave, Exhume as like auxiliary reanimation abilities. They could even go like Metamorphosis Fanatic if you wanted to. There's other ways to do it. Like, they could ban Reanimate if Troll doesn't cut it. And I think they would probably have to. But Entomb is like banning Brainstorm, but for Reanimator players.
Phil, you had something to say about my statement there?
Yeah, I think that there's a blend there. I agree with Max on mostly on this one, where I think Reanimator being like they've stated multiple times that like they look at Reanimator as a legacy macro type that they want to have around, and I think that's all well and good. I think that the part that's missing from when I hear you talk about it, I go, even though they say that they want Reanimator as part of the metagame, they've never explicitly said this is the part of what Reanimator means that is untouchable. Where like they've alluded to Days and Ancient Tomb and Brainstorm as like the untouchable things, whereas in Vintage they have explicitly said Mishra's Workshop is untouchable, Bazaar is untouchable. Like, you will get to play those cards here. Like, they haven't done that for Legacy, and if they did, it would just like clear all of that up, because then you would be like, no, Entomb is a pillar because it's part of the Reanimator package that they want to always have in the format. Same thing with Ancient Tomb, same thing with Days Wasteland, same thing with Brainstorm, blah blah blah. So like in that's a regard where it's like, again, like they don't want to be held to it, but like they do that with Vintage, so that there's already a precedent set for a format where they do.
And they have done that with Days and Wasteland in the last thing. They were basically like, these are pillars. Like, well, we don't talk about it as much anymore.
They've never explicitly stated a list of like, here's the things,
Agree.
And I think, yeah, you're right. They could do that, but also, I mean, we have critical thinking abilities, and I think one of the things to do here is understand, like, hey, what makes this deck reasonable to play over something else, right? And if you ban Entomb, there's no reason to play Reanimator over a different deck. It's just not competitively viable anymore. Yeah, it can exist in some form, the same way that, like, some ultra casual decks can exist in some form, but that's not what they mean when they mean they want this to exist as a macro archetype in Legacy. And so, yeah, it's like you can figure out what those cards are, but it's like by playing with and against the deck. And Entomb for Reanimator is that. It's the card that makes the deck tick.
All right, so we spent enough time, I think, on Troll. Let's talk about Microspawn.
On the other side of the speed spectrum. Yeah, Microspawn. So I have
we should mention that part, because that was the thing, is on the other side of the format speed, right?
So I think it's funny because so I've been playing Eldrazi probably, this is a confession, I've been playing Eldrazi probably more than any other deck.
You are not absolved.
I am not absolved since since it was printed, because I like winning. The deck is really good, and basically one of the things that it provides is it has crazy inevitability. Eldrazi is secretly a control deck that can just also beat. Like, as far as control not existing, Eldrazi is the closest thing we have to it. It has crazy inevitability, and through, Ayavugan, but it also has, like, good aggro draws with like Thought-Knot Seer, or like Fleshraker chaining with Kozilek's Command, stuff like that. It has the One Ring, so you never run out of gas. And then also the fact that Microspawn, and here's the thing about it, it can be your double double Stone Rain, right? Where you kick it on like turn 4 and it nukes a basic land and finds a wasteland, and just there was some board presence and now you can never recover out of it. It can do that. When the Eldrazi deck is ahead, it can just put the nail in the coffin. But also it can be utility. It can be like, okay, my opponent's starting to go pretty big. I need to go bigger. I'm going to get my Gaia's Cradle. So because I already had an Eye of Ugin, now I can just Eye every turn. I can get the Eye if I was missing that. I can get, my opponent has, I'm under the gun. My opponent has like a Delver and a Dragon's Rage Channeler in play. I can grab Blast Zone and not lose anymore. So the fact that it can do the double Stone Rain as its like default most powerful play, but isn't limited to that, is what makes the card so busted and makes the deck that doesn't normally have any deck manipulation so flexible. Because it's being able to find the right tool for the game state.
Yeah, and they say as much in the announcement.
Actually, I want to bring up one more thing, given
Please.
I see the Blood Moon highlighted in there.
Yes.
It's also a way to beat Blood Moon because, like, sure, you got a Petal. Now you can crack it for green, cast your Microspawn, and grab a basic. Like, it is a reliable card at getting what you need when you need it. And also, like, the deck plays 3 Eye of Ugins. Well, with Microspawn, if you need it, it plays 7 Eye of Ugins. It plays 5 Gaia's Cradles. It plays 8 Wastelands. Or 12 Wastelands if you count double Stone Rain. But, it does all of that. And so it's not the fact that it does any one of those things. It's the fact that it can do whatever is the most damaging in that point of the game that makes it so busted.
Well, Max, is beyond me talking about how much I hate this deck, let's talk about what happens to the deck after this ban.
Ooh, I love it. Okay, I'm actually really excited about this. Because when I was iterating on like every single version of Eldrazi under the sun when MH3 came out, the most fun builds to me were the Eldrazi Linebreaker builds. The builds that were in red for Linebreaker and were an actual factual aggro deck. If you haven't played with or against Linebreaker, it is a sick
I watched
card.
Phil get trounced by a Linebreaker at Eternal Weekend.
It killed me before I took my second turn.
Yeah, it is a fast fucking card.
Just beaten.
Sorry, language. But
You're
anyway,
fine. Yeah.
I love the aggro build of this. If Eldrazi is an honest to God aggro deck, great.
Are we going to see Reality Smasher back?
We'll see, maybe. But I think value over replacement might be like playing more Lords instead. Because the Lords are really, like, if you have 2 Lords in play, your Fleshraker is pumping out 2 3s every time you cast a spell, which is pretty good. But
and they only cost 1.
Yeah, and they pay for themselves, and yeah. So I like kind of going heavy Lords and heavy Linebreaker, but maybe, like, I don't know, it could be.
Max, do you think that the list that they showed as their example list in the ban announcement
Stock
has
Eldrazi.
Stock Eldrazi has 2 One Rings in it. Do we not just default to 4 One Ring like immediately?
I don't think you necessarily want to play the control build of Eldrazi anymore once you lose Microspawn.
You lose that inevitability that it has that allows you to just go get your Eye of Ugin or your Cradle. Like we were talking before.
Yeah, okay. I don't think this is basically like a slow Eldrazi deck, right? Like, the game plan for this deck is that you just stabilize the board and then slam Devourer of Destinies until your opponent loses. Like, or, goes like some big combo of Kozilek's Command and Fleshraker or something like that.
Eldrazi is the super aggro deck of choice when we're talking about turn 2 One Rings just being it's a slow version. It's too slow.
The slow version is So
exactly.
We've talked about where Eldrazi is going to be. We've talked about where Reanimator is going to be. But with the time we have left, Max, where's Legacy going to be? What does the metagame look like after this ban?
That's a great question. So what I'm hoping happens is that people get sick of playing Oops All Spells, I guess. I don't know. But right now, one of the big problems is that, as Carmen pointed out in writing that, is that Legacy is super condensed into like your mulligan. Like, is your 7 or 6 good enough to beat what your opponent can present, because like Ponder is as bad as it's ever been. Like you barely have time to turn one Ponder these days. You need to play to the board. You need to play things. You don't have time to like dirtle around and find stuff later, because there is no later. And so one of the things keeping that down was Microspawn. I think the other one is Oops All Spells. And I think that the resiliency of that deck is pretty painful, but it also is, it also has a fail rate of mulliganing to Oblivion sometimes. So maybe it's okay, but it's not, I think, a particularly, like, I also play Oops All Spells for what it's worth. I think if you look at my MTG Goldfish, I have a lot of recent results with that deck. But so I'm not like bashing on it because of any moral thing. Like I love playing it when I want to win, but it's just a little bit too resilient. Like you can make Fairy Macabre, which is like a solid graveyard hate piece that costs 0, have basically no text box by just sideboarding correctly, or even in your main deck just by having an extra mana up. Like, just so that people illustrate what I mean, if you play 2 extra Dread Returns, an extra Thassa's Oracle, and a Lotleth Giant into your, like those 4 cards in your sideboard and just swap them in, then there's no 2 cards anyone can pick off with Fairy Macabre that stop you from winning on the spot. And so, like, you can make just these things not matter, and the deck is a little bit too resilient, I think. It also compresses games into this, like, is my opening hand good enough? And I think that we just don't want to be, we want to be able to play Magic. We don't want as many non-games as we're experiencing right now.
The best way I heard that described is we're not looking for like high noon at the OK Corral where everyone just goes draw, like
yeah.
Max, if they came back around and were like, yeah, okay, we're recognizing that Oops is a problem for all of the issues that you just stated. What's the target? What do you actually touch to maneuver it away from the problem that it's presenting?
As stupid as it would look on a ban list, Memory's Journey. Because it's the card, like right now, if you want Oops All Spells to exist, which you might not, like if you want Oops All Spells to not exist, like hit Informer or Spy. Sure.
Yeah,
right.
agreed.
But if you want Oops All Spells to exist, you want Oops Enthusiasts to be happy, or you think it contributes something to the format, which I'm not going to weigh in on. Like personally, I think that there's enough people who enjoy the deck that, sure, I mean, I'll get into that in a second, but Memory's Journey is the card that basically means that your soft graveyard hate doesn't work. And if soft graveyard hate beat Oops All Spells, I think that we'd all have a very different feeling about the deck.
Yeah, that's interesting. The other thing I was watching, Bryant Cook's reaction to live reaction to the ban list. He mentioned some 5 mana card that does what Balustrade Spy does, or 6 mana or something like that.
Yeah, there's a couple 5 mana versions.
Yeah. So I'm honestly, I would my choice would be to get rid of Spy. Just because, fine, yeah, it does look silly but all of the cards in that deck are going to look silly on the ban list. Like, let's be honest, there's not a single card that you can ban from that and then explain to aliens later what the fuck was going on.
No, I think that if you wanted to, the cards that wouldn't look strange on a ban list to the aliens is something like either Dread Return or Thassa's Oracle, and because Oops All Spells before Thassa's
Oracle does not. Thassa's Oracle will do nothing to stop the deck.
Right. No, no. I'm saying that there are enough tools now to replace Thassa's Oracle, so it's no longer a reasonable option. But if somebody saw Thassa's Oracle on the ban list, it wouldn't be obscure to think why. I think the same thing with Dread Return. But something like Memory's Journey, you need to have all the other puzzle pieces in place to understand how did this get here.
Yeah. That said, I think that Dread Return is important because it keeps other decks alive, like Dredge and Breakfast. And so you wouldn't want to destroy those decks because of the sins of Oops All Spells. And Thassa's Oracle, you don't want to destroy Doomsday because of Oops All Spells. So I think that if you want to hit Oops All Spells specifically, you want to hit it hard, you hit one of the 2 namesake creatures. And if you want to do a soft hit...
Do we lose?
We lost them. We're
going to need to shuffle ourselves back into the library and go again.
No, it's okay. So continue. It's still recording.
Okay. So anyway, welcome back, Zach. So what we got is that if you hit, want to go for a hard hit, you hit those big 2 creatures. I think the deck could potentially exist still as a Belcher shell in replacing one of those. I've been playing a couple supplemental Belchers already because having 8 targets is kind of iffy. You have a 65% chance to find one in a given 7. But if you bump that up to 10, you have like a 70% chance. And you know how those numbers compound as you mulligan. So I've been playing like 2 Belchers in the list. But yeah, you could cut one of those and play 4 Belchers and it would exist. I don't think you'd be able to play Pact of Negation anymore. Or you could maybe, because you can always belch in the upkeep before you die. But anyway, point being is you could do that, or you could do a soft hate and ban Memory's Journey.
Max, call your shot. This time, next ban announcement, you somehow accept our invitation to come back on. Are we not talking about Memory's Journey as no longer part of Legacy?
So before the troll ban, I would have said absolutely not. But given that they've banned troll, I think that they're no longer shows that they're not worried about the optics of like upcycling is on the ban list, but they're actually concerned about how these things play and what they actually are, and being very agnostic about optics there. And so, yeah, I think we could see Memory's Journey on the ban list.
Zach, we got to build the meme of the small domino troll of Khazad-dûm knocking over the big domino, which is
it's Memory's Journey.
Memory's Journey, yeah.
Yeah, perhaps. All right. Well, Max, again, thank you so much for coming on. You know, I said I was going to say this in the beginning. We got your ban and restricted announcement take on the Ides of March.
We did.
And today, tomorrow will be April Fool's. I think that's just setting the precedent, is it not?
It is. I have one last thing to add. I'm just touching on a point about playing against Reanimator not being fun, or what have you. I think that you touched on that earlier.
I did, yes.
I think that pretty much no good Legacy deck is that fun to play against. And but that's being able to stop them from having fun is what makes Legacy fun.
Yes, I would agree.
Yeah.
Stuff like Breakfast is not fun to play against.
Right, just getting comboed out and dying like by Doomsday or Breakfast, not super fun. Getting Blood Mooned and can't cast your spells, not super fun. Getting Chalice, can't cast your spells, not super fun. Getting Dazed and Wasted out of existence, not super fun. Kind of sitting there as your control opponent jerks it for 20 minutes, deciding when they want to win, not super fun.
Look at you, countertop players.
Countertop, we haven't had that since 2017. Go elsewhere.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
Basically, we can't be looking at like, hey, is this fun to play against? Because then we ban every Legacy deck. But the point is, like, is the counterplay sufficient that the dance of can I stop them fun? And I think that if the deck is if the tempo deck is like fragile and the dedicated deck is powerful but loses to hate, I think that dance becomes fun again, and that's what matters.
Agreed. I was going to make that exact counterpoint, so I'm glad you did. All right. Awesome. Max, again, thanks so much for coming on. We will catch you.
Pleasure to be here.
Soon.
Yes,
for sure, because we're going to have to follow up and find out a little bit more about what's going on with the format as things go on. But always great to have you on, man.
Yeah. See you next time. Thank you, Zach. Thank you, Phil.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Before you go, I need some help. Please subscribe to this channel and do your part to help sustain the Legacy content ecosystem. Just subscribing to this channel goes a long way to reminding YouTube that people love and support this format. Now, if you really want to go the extra mile, you should think about supporting us through Patreon. Both the links for subscription and Patreon are right here. And if you're listening on an audio format, you can go to patreon.com/EternalDurdles. Thanks so much for watching.